Oh, good evening, everyone, and welcome to THI Talks Innovation and Artificial Intelligence podcast. My name is Ingrid Munoz, and I'm very pleased to welcome you today to this live podcast organized by Technische Hochschule Ingolstadt. So it's a great pleasure to welcome two outstanding speakers with highly complementary perspectives. First, Lama Nachman, join us from California. Also, equally pleased to welcome Professor Ignacio Álvarez, professor at the Technische Hochschule Ingolstadt.
Okay, welcome everyone. I'm really happy to be here and really looking forward to the conversation. A quick intro. I have been in the tech world for the last 30 years in Silicon Valley, which took me between like large companies like Intel and Microsoft, as well as startups and early stage and late stage startups. Most relevant to this conversation, I would say, is the last 20 years of my life that I have spent driving research in context-aware computing and human-centered AI at Intel, leading multidisciplinary research labs that are really focused on amplifying human potential with AI. So we kind of looked at this from the perspective of ethnographic research. How do we go and discover unmet needs in the world in different types of environments? We've worked in areas like manufacturing, early childhood learning, and enabling people with disabilities. And then thinking about what type of human AI systems we should build in order to support people in these different environments. Built these systems, deployed them in the real world, learned from them, and figured out how to take that innovation into impact through products that Intel made, or work with our customers, or take things into open source. Another relevant part of the work, I would say, is over the last 9-ish years, worked on, advocated for a responsible AI program across Intel, built that program along with people who are really extremely passionate about making that happen, and built it through principles, impact assessments, advisory councils that we put in place to ensure that everything that Intel developed and deployed was actually done responsibly.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Let me start by thanking you, Ingrid, for organizing this beautiful podcast, and Lama for coming over and wanted to share her copious experience on the topic. And for everyone online, hi, my name is Ignacio. I'm professor at THI, professor for Human-Centered Intelligence Systems. A bit about myself, for those who don't know me, is I became professor actually rather recently, about a year ago. I spent the last 10, almost 11 years working at Intel as well. That's where I met Lama. And before that, I was working at BMW. I actually did my PhD while working at BMW, and I started kind of with like a childhood dream. I don't know if you guys remember, there was this series in the 80s. I think it was famous also here in Germany, where it's called Knight Rider. And so the main character, Michael Knight, who is played by David Hasselhoff, he had this intelligent car with him, and it really stuck with me. And then kind of like as I was growing up and I decided to pursue my PhD, I kind of like locked onto that idea. I want to build intelligent cars. And what I do in my lab is, I care about how do we build machines that understand humans rather than forcing only the humans to understand the machines. And my personal goal at THI is really to prepare the next generation of engineers, of designers, to really be the orchestrators of these AI technologies for the good of the world, right?
So,
Thank
by
you,
the way,
Ignacio.
another thing we have in common, I loved Knight Rider. I was obsessed with that show.
Thank you, Ignacio. That actually that leads to my first question. Artificial intelligence is often associated with uncertainties regarding jobs and human roles, which you already said. You are preparing the future generation, so to say. But from your perspective, should we understand the relationship between AI and human work? Is AI replacing humans, or rather transforming how humans create value?
Okay, so I would start by saying that I believe 100% in the complementarity of humans and AI, right? And the reason I say that is if you think about AI, right? AI is really good at processing all sorts of information, large scale, multi dimensions, synthesizing this information, finding the connection in it, and surfacing things that really are very hard for humans to understand. Contrast that with people. We're really good at learning from extremely limited data.
Mm-hmm.
We can apply our learning to environments that we've never seen before. We can make decisions in highly ambiguous situations. And we do all of this in the most energy efficient way at 20 watts, right? The human brain. So if you think about these, like logically, when you have such complementarity, the way we can utilize that is actually building systems that incorporate the strengths of both of these extremely different actors. So rather than thinking about how do we go and build things that replace humans at unbelievable cost, the most logical thing is to say, how do we solve problems that we never imagined possible to solve and generate new value in the world because we are bringing those things, those two very different, systems together and build these things that are unimaginable. The problem that I have with, the path that we constantly think that we're on is that rhetoric around, humans and AI and where, frankly, some of the development of AI is headed is that we seem to take the approach of AI somehow is like a force of nature, right? It's just like progressing on its own. We have no agency in how it actually develops, right? AI is moving in this direction. How do humans adapt? And I think that's absolutely the wrong way to think about this thing, right? We have complete agency in how do we build AI in ways that can support human flourishing. In thinking about how we bring AI and humans together to really just solve the unimaginable problems that we never thought were possible. And that's how we should be progressing towards that development of AI systems, in my opinion.
I totally agree.
It's a really good question, Ingrid, and I think it's a question that is in everybody's minds right now, both in the industry as well as those who want to get into industry, right? Is like, how is AI going to change the future of work? How do we work with AI? Will AI replace us in every possible way? I think if you look at if you pay attention actually to the most powerful people right now in the industry, folks like Sam Altman from the CEO from OpenAI, or Jensen Huang, the CEO from NVIDIA, or Jan LeCun from Meta. All these guys, they are sort of more or less saying a similar message. It's part you have to decouple that there is a part of it is building a little bit of hype, because of course their businesses are built around people believing in it, and so they are all, I would say, AI augmentation optimists, and they're all saying that that AI is this wonderful tool that is going to help us become a lot more capable, a lot more powerful than what we are today. Of course, they're being pressured and they're being pushed, and they have to admit that the AI is going to replace many jobs. But they do present it as a way of like, hey, you're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job to someone who is using AI to be a lot more effective on what you are if you don't adopt AI. So therefore, you need to adopt AI. And then there's others that say, well, we're just becoming managers of AI, and so we just have to evolve our jobs from, doing the things ourselves to now telling the AI what to do. And like Alexander Wang is one of those who says those things. And then sort of like there's the other side of the industry, and these tend to be the more thinkers. They're not necessarily the business people, but it's more the people who sees who's built AI. People who has a lot of background. Like Geoffrey Hinton, who someone calls the godfather of AI. or Ilyas Square, who was actually one of his students, and then he created ChatGPT as we all used it. And these guys, they kind of see AI not for what it can do today, but for where they see AI as a race, as an exponential race going, and they see the capabilities that AI is going to have, and they worry that that AI will be able to do pretty much every job that we can do. It's not all of them, or not just one, but like all of them, right? Anything that we can think, anything that we can learn, AI potentially will be able to do it as well, because they sort of see this path of artificial general intelligence, or AGI, coming there. And so they are a little bit more pessimistic to it, and they have to raise those words of concern. I think, today, the industry is, including here in Germany where we are, is what you have this dichotomy playing around. You have people who's like not trusting AI, and people, companies, CEOs saying, oh no, we have to adopt AI because AI is going to save a lot of cost, is going to augment our productivity. And they're paying attention to see, is it really working? Is it really panning off? In some cases, they become, after some failed experiments, they become pessimists themselves, and they say, well, AI is just hype, and so we're not going to adopt it. And some others, they see it working a little bit, and they think that it's going to work for everything, when it's actually a lot more complex. And so, yeah, my perspective, I tend to like it. Like, if you look at the industry, people that I really pay attention to. I pay attention to Lama. She's a really great voice of reason in this crazy world. So it would be great to get some more feedback from her. But I also like some folks like Dario Amodei, CEO of Anthropic, and he says, the way he puts it, I think is really good. He says something along the lines of that when you're working, the meaning of work really comes from the human relationships that we have, that those relationships and connections are really not economic labor in a sense. And so AI is a tool, and then yes, it's going to take some of the tasks that we do, but the tasks that we should concentrate ourselves on, those tasks that are more human-centered, and that involve relating to people. And of course, we need to adopt the technology because it's very, very useful in many ways, right? So I think I'm more towards those lines. And so the technology that we have today is flawed in many senses, and we are flawed as people as well, but we have to work together with it to make something better than what we used to do before.
Yeah, and I think, if you think along those lines, right, really what we've been seeing is this advancement of these general capabilities, right? Mostly if we think about LLMs and some of the agentic systems that are built. So we're developing a lot of general purpose technologies in so many ways, right, around AI that can then be used, deployed, built into systems in whatever ways that would make sense. And my point is, really where the rubber will hit the road is in the deployment of these systems in these different environments and in these different, companies and healthcare and all of these places where actually people are doing work. So in some sense, it really, the people who are actually the companies that are responsible for the deployment of these technology and for the development, for changing their workflows in order to incorporate AI into every possible function that they might be doing, that really needs to take into account. And I would argue that today, a lot of the value that we're seeing in AI and the things that people talk about, right, are barely skimming the surface of what is possible. But then we look at it and we see tons of displacement, right? We see a lot of people who are being laid off, and I'm sure in the US, people are aware of the level of layoffs that are happening at scale, and everybody kind of quoting AI to be the reason. But if you step back and look at this, really, it's not happening because people have just found all of these replacement opportunity and that we can be so much more effective by firing all of these people and AI having solved the problem. That's not what we're seeing. If you dig underneath this, what we're seeing is a belief in a future where AI is extremely important, investing heavily in all of that, AI development and infrastructure development and all of that, and then looking at a balance sheet that requires letting go of a lot of people and firing people as a result. So my point is, for all of these businesses to not only optimize cost, but generate a lot of new value, they have to be looking at how do we build systems that can make that value come about, right? Forget about just the development of like these, general AI systems. So like, how do you actually put them in practice in order to, in healthcare, in manufacturing, in enterprise, and all of these different things. And today that value isn't being realized. I mean, that's what you will see when you look at that. So my point is, to realize that value, there are a lot of ways that can realize that value that have humans at the center of that value generation.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe just to add a quick thought as well, is like many of the discussions I have either with students who are worried, like, oh, I don't know, we're getting into the workforce now, it's so difficult to find entry-level jobs, how do we do it? Is AI really, making the raising the bar so high that we really can't? And I really tell them, look, this is we are at a critical at an inflection point that is being pushed by several technologies, including AI, right? And I think what you need to value is your own experience, your own knowledge. You need to value the most your critical thinking, because if you are the kind of person that offloads your think process into an AI to do a job and you don't check what comes out of it, then you're obviously not being the best that you can be. So, critical, AI allows you to think even more. So you need to do even more thinking, critical thinking. You obviously need to understand AI at least at the basic level, because these systems are not infallible. You need to have a good mental model of what are the dangers, what are the fallbacks that you can implement in order to complement the parts where AI is not good. It's not good because maybe it lacks the proper training on that field that you're working, or it lacks the proper knowledge, or it lacks the tools, the access to the context that it needs in order to help you. And that is the value of human experience, right? And so that is the value that people needs to put up front, and that's what they should make as the most explicit part of their value proposition when they're looking for jobs. That and of course their own creativity and curiosity, because AI gives you amazing opportunities. I think there has never been a better time in the world to do startups than right now. You can do a single person startup if you have a great idea.
Recently, AI is moving into physical environments like mobility, healthcare, robotics, infrastructure. And I am asking this question because right now I see Manfred from Germany. He asked this question: where do you see the greatest opportunity for AI to improve inclusion, especially for people with physical disabilities?
All right, Lama, I think you need to take this one and explain a little bit about the background, why you can talk about this.
Sure. So one of the projects that I've been, most passionate about has actually been focused on improving inclusion with people with disabilities. And that really started with the work that we've done with Professor Stephen Hawking back in 2011, I believe, is when we started. And really, the idea was essentially, if you think about people who have, say, a physical disability, they in many ways can use their machines in order to, like, let's say, you're someone who, needs to have, an ability to, say, communicate, and you are not able to speak, and you can type and whatever, then you're able to actually use a machine to speak on your behalf. And the opposite is true, right? So, if you have either a physical disability or like not an ability to speak, then one or those two, you can today, with speech recognition and speech synthesis and all of these things, you can actually still communicate with the world and be active in contributing in that world. The problem is if you have both of them, right? And in the case of ALS, as an example, which is what Stephen Hawking had, you really can't type, nor can you speak. So then with that extreme disability, you need to have to think about how systems can be built in order to support that. So we've built a system that enables Stephen to essentially use his computer in the same way that we all do, with simply just moving his cheek, right? That's the only thing that he had control over. And of course, now you can think of other types of approaches like brain-computer interface and all of that. But that is a case of extreme disability. And there you're really utilizing AI predictability in order to, like, predictive components in order to reduce the type of interaction that's needed for somebody to be able to express their thoughts and communicate and just engage with the world in the same way that we all do. If you step backwards a bit and you think about like what AI has enabled in terms of being able to go into, recognizing things, right? In understanding speech, being able to move, like mobility with, autonomous cars and all of that. That is really that ability to understand that physical world and to act in that physical world and to enable people to act indirectly in that physical world can really be completely transformational for people with disabilities, right? Whether it's being able to control a wheelchair with, the least amount of interactions possible, or whether it's about, being able to navigate the world and not being able to see, but have AI perceive a lot of these things in the physical world for you, and then give you that information real time so that you can navigate through that world. Or even some of the work that we were doing at Intel in terms of enabling people who can't hear or we cannot speak, and essentially utilizing AI to understand conversations real time and, take that input from people and translate, say sign language automatically into actually conversations that other people can actually speak. So trying to bridge that, lack of equity and that lack of physical ability, right, is fantastic. We're also seeing a lot of examples where you can bring AI into also helping bridge cognitive disabilities as well, right? And thinking about, the whole space of neurodiversity and supporting, neurodiverse individuals in that way through bringing a lot of AI capabilities into the education space. So, the thing that we always have to be thinking about in these cases is you are dealing with people who are extremely vulnerable. And this brings us back to the whole discussion that we've been having about ethical AI. The minute you're actually working with people who are extremely vulnerable, you have to be really thinking about how do you, from the get-go, build systems that understand that vulnerability, that understand the constraints around, design for privacy, design for protecting people, and all of that from the get-go. Because if you don't do that, then you can see a world where people who are so dependent in these type of technologies get completely abused within these systems as well. So it's always something that we have to be thinking about from the get-go when we actually build these type of systems.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this question. I think it's that's really the heart of human-centered AI. And I'll mention one thing also, maybe just an anecdote here. I think one of the first times that I saw Lama in person, it was in California in our offices at Intel, and Eddie Redmayne, who I don't know if people will remember, he's an actor, the British actor who played Stephen Hawking in this movie, The Theory of Everything, I think it was called. And he was visiting us around, and I recognized him, of course. I mean, he's a popular actor. And I was like, oh, this guy. And there was a whole entourage around. And then Lama was showing some of the demos of the technology because he wanted to understand a little bit better how did Stephen interact with it so that he could get into the whole experience of him as a character. And that made me realize, wow, Lama is really important here. And it really resonated with me because as one of the projects in which I worked when I was doing my PhD was a voting system that enabled people with disabilities to vote, people who couldn't move, who couldn't speak. How do you cast a vote in these kind of systems? At that time, we were developing this technology without the use of AI, but I think AI just makes it a lot more powerful. And one of the things that I want people to think that we do in our lab too is that we shouldn't think about disabilities only as we understand disabilities on the medical term, but we think of disabilities as temporary disabilities as well. When people is engaged on activities like what we do when we're driving, right, is that we're distracted, we're cognitive, not paying attention to certain things. AI can also augment these, and one of the things that I see as a great potential application areas in AI is this ability that we have now of using multimodal signals to feed into the AI as a context and to make it more aware of things that it could be doing to help us, right? It could be monitoring our heart rate, could be providing some advice for some medical conditions. It could be understanding when we are distracted or not distracted, when we're capable of certain things and when we're not. And so I think these are very, very powerful technologies. And so if you're interested in this, please ping me. We'll work with Lama on this. We have lots of years of experience, and I think there is a lot more that we can do to make AI more clever and to support us in all the possible ways for both physical and cognitive disabilities, right?
Silicon Valley gave us social media, which often is seen as a harmful to both the individual and society more broadly. Why should we expect AI to turn out differently?
I love this question, Stefan. I think we shouldn't, and that's why you shouldn't be a passive actor in this. You should be an active actor in this. We are all owning how AI plays in our life, in our societies, and we have to voice our concerns and try to do the right thing. So my recommendation to do, Stefan, is don't trust what Silicon Valley will turn out to do, because historically, transformational technologies, but not necessarily the best for humanity. So you should expect the same from AI. Please get involved in it, get active in it, and I think that there's people who wants to do good for it, right? I think Lama, maybe you can mention the AI for Good. I think that you've been very involved in that, and I think that's a fantastic platform that definitely can augment our voice.
Yeah, so I mean, I completely 1,000% agree with what you just said, Ignacio, right? And this was my point actually from the beginning of this conversation. And it absolutely, we shouldn't expect it to go in a good direction, because the market forces and the incentive structures point us in a different direction, right? If what you're trying to do is make the small handful of companies generate billions of dollars and extract value from all these communities, then it will progress in the wrong direction, right? And as a result, right, it's not about whether this capability is, with that capability, we can get to amazing outcomes. Even social media, like I would argue that the reason we all got excited about social media is about actually equity and enabling people to have a voice and not just large media and whatever to have that voice, right? Yet we also how it actually materialized, because the market forces drove it in that direction. My hope is with social media in our rear view mirror and understanding how badly that went, is that we can actually drive towards a very different future. And part of that is, that is on government and regulation and all of these things to actually ensure that these things happen. It is in a democratic system that we all have a voice, right, to make, to drive towards these type of futures. And there is, in some ways, we also need to think about it as value. It's not that we're saying we don't want value to be generated, but in what way should value be generated in a way that actually supports the broader need out of humanity and the needs of the environment, right? And not burning up the whole planet in order to get there, right? So I believe that from a sustainability perspective and from a progress perspective, right? I mean, if you end up wiping out humanity in order for this to happen, how are you going to generate value? I mean, it's a self-destructive thing, right? I mean, even viruses understand that they shouldn't behave in that way, right? So it's like in so many ways, what we need to be really thinking about is how we as a collective, as humanity, as we sound all of these sirens and going, AI needs to be developed very, very differently and used in very, very different ways and incorporated in our lives in ways that understand how to support human flourishing. And, there are a lot of interesting ways. Like you mentioned, one of the nonprofits that I'm on, the Partnership on AI, is really focused on exactly that, right? How do we drive towards a very different future where equity and shared prosperity and humanity is at the center of AI development and deployment in the world? And working with the tech industry, with academia, with civil society, in order to bring that collective to actually change that outcome. And that's, like I said, on the board of PAI, right? So, and I see that work day in and day out. And that is the way to, like, we can't just assume that regulation will get there. We also have to influence regulation. And we have to, in the meantime, work within the context of all of these, companies and academia and so on. And you guys all have a huge role to play, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Thinking about that development and where AI should go, rather than have the few decide and then academia go support, the workers to get there. Like, that's not what we should be doing, right? Academia should actually be challenging the status quo and coming up with a very different path of the development of AI.
I love that you say this, Lama, because there's something that I take very, very much to heart. I think as an educator, I think the only path forward to make sure that AI doesn't turn as bad as social media did is to really educate people on AI, to really adopt AI, learn how to work with AI, not to work for AI or against AI,
100%.
but really to understand how AI works. And I think that we actually have in Europe, in particular, I think we have a unique, both a unique moral framework, which is, I think, started. I don't think this is perfect, but I think it also needs to change in certain areas. Definitely, the complexities and the problems that access and management of data poses. But definitely, I think Europe has some potential. It's right now at the disadvantage because most of the I would say the technology development is happening outside of Europe, right, in the US and as well as in China. But we do have a unique value proposition, and is that I think we have a lot more denser population that is that has higher education compared to the other countries, right? Our baseline, right, is a lot higher than the baseline in those other countries, right? And so up to right now, I think it's something around 30% higher, right? And so if we really democratize AI knowledge, AI understanding across Europe, right, we're going to raise the bar for like how AI needs to be applied. And then that is that is going to result in a very different application within Europe than it will within the US or in China, where, forces are different. And essentially this difference between AI native and non-AI native is going to be radical, right? And so I think that is the capability we have in Europe, and I think education plays a huge role in this. So that's how I hope that we can do it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I actually, I do see the question about like the differences between the US and Europe. And, to the point that Ignacio just made, right? If I look at what the EU AI Act is, and like a lot of the work around, regulation in general in Europe, and I would say that there's like, Europe is way more advanced in terms of thinking through the impact of AI and how to regulate AI than the US is, right? And in the US, what you see is the Wild West at this point, because, there was some progress towards that. Now there's a complete step back from regulation. And as a result, a lot of the states and even like different, cities within these states are recognizing that there is that complete gap. And as a result, what you're seeing is gazillion regulations and bills being put forward in all of the state and in the different states to actually try to regulate AI and solve for a lot of these problems. So in so many ways, if you think about the impact that Europe has, right? Even if like the major AI development isn't happening in Europe, that takes me back to the early point that I was making. The rubber will hit the road on deployment of AI, not just who is developing AI, right? And if you think about it from an AI supply chain perspective, the requirements of the customers at the end of the day are what's going to drive, the requirements for the people who are developing AI, right? In the same way that anyone who puts it, like if you have, think about the car industry, right? And the pollution and the regulation around that, right? If, California for the longest time drove what those requirements were in terms of technology development for cars in order to support the environmental needs, even though there wasn't like a worldwide whatever. But if you think about the people who develop these cars, they can't afford to go develop million versions of these cars for every, just from a management perspective, it doesn't make any sense, right? So in the same way, by actually having a very strong regulatory space within Europe and being a large, population that consumes these capabilities, you have a lot of power to go drive that. And people start to look at what could be a de facto standard, even if the government in the US and regulation in the US is not driving towards that, right? So everybody has a lot of agency to go and drive that development of AI by essentially putting your money, right, where your mouth is, right? It's just like by ensuring that these requirements are set forth and you're driving the line on what is okay to be deployed. And companies that develop AI would actually look at it in that way. That's the beauty of supply chains.
Thank you, Lama. And we have very interesting questions in our chat, but I think our time is slowly going to the end. I'm going to read this last question because I think it's very important. What AI development today do you believe society is still underestimating?
That's a really good one. I think there's many. There is one in particular that I think we are barely scratching the surface of, and is the use of AI for new I don't know if I should call it materials or products or medicines, because it's all of it, right? It's like the application of AI. Like all of this has been like until now highly experimental, right? And like we try to put these things together, and then there you go, you get a product that it turns out to be useful for either engineering, like a new type of compound for I don't know, creating concrete or something like that. That it turns out to be lighter and more stronger, more durable, and all of that. A lot of that is experimentation, right? And the same for medicine, right? Like that's how we discover medicines, is like a lot of experimentation. And I think AI really has this potential of augmenting this capability to experiment, to come up with new materials, with new drugs, new discoveries in these fields, that the applications of which we're literally just barely scratching. I think there is a limit to how do we build that feedback loop to the AI systems that we're building that are specialized on these tasks. That is challenging because there has to be at least some physical experimentation in order to demonstrate and to give more feedback to these AI systems. But once we start to build those, I think the potentials for many industries are going to be like mind-blowing. I really think that we are underestimating this, and we have hit a little bit of background on that, right, Lama, on some of the work we did at Intel, but I think we're barely starting to scratch the surface.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, material discovery, drug discovery are areas that, are completely transformational. And frankly, I wish there was way more investment in these areas because, they have a lot of potential and, they will have the most impact. The other piece I would also say is around, sustainability and, essentially reducing carbon footprint, figuring out how to reverse a lot of the progress towards, what we've done so far, which is blowing up the world in so many ways. So I think there's a lot in terms of sustainability, not just building AI systems that are sustainable, but actually completely changing, the progress in the environment and climate change. And I think that's an area that AI can actually play a huge role in. And again, I think it's a place that we're completely underinvesting in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think this is an opportunity for us here at THI to really put more into those type of research. We have some really strong environmental engineer applications. I think we should look even harder at those, and the material discovery and all of that. I think that that has to be done for real.
And we hope this discussion offers meaningful insights into how artificial intelligence is shaping our future. And thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Ingrid, and thank you,
It was
everyone.
a fantastic conversation. Thank you all for the great questions.
And
you,
hopefully
Lama.
you leave us optimists as well.